Okay, so there is a. Sorry, this is kind of counterintuitive. So there's an issue in the newer Star Trek movies, a perceived issue that actually too many people don't really talk about. But I actually think is sort of a non-issue, especially if you're more familiar with just the greater universe of Star Trek, and that is the perceived racism on the part of Vulcans towards humans and other life forms. Although I guess the other life forms aren't really mentioned; it's just towards humans. And this is namely in the first movie, 2009 Star Trek, that Spock as a boy is being taunted by the other Vulcans, and they make a point out of their insults, that his human heritage somehow makes him inferior. And then later, when he's applying to be part of the Vulcan Science Academy, they sort of, in a more adult way, sort of take the same jibe. They say that it's, congratulations, and in spite of your disadvantage, and they're like, oh, well, it's because your mom's a human. Well, see, this is something that was actually mentioned in the original series. This is actually like one of those canon points where it was like, yeah, they really got that. In the episode, it was when Spock's mom actually comes on board the Enterprise, both Amanda and Sarek. Yes, Sarek, not Surak. Surak was the founder of the Vulcan philosophy of logic and non-emotion. Anyway, so when she comes aboard, the name of the episode is completely escaping me right now, but she mentions in that episode that he was taunted, and they show this in the movie she explains that it was because, and she says because they were taunting you because of you were human. And that he came home, and being a Vulcan, he was at a young age to the point where he already understood that it just was not cool around Vulcans to show emotions. But she said that she could sense that if he wasn't in that cultural institution of planet Vulcan, basically, he would have been crying. And that's another thing that I really think is really stupid, is people who are under the impression that Vulcans don't have emotions. No, there's again, another thing that they clearly explain in the original series, which from my point of view, if you're going to say anything about Star Trek at all, it better fucking lead back to the original series. I mean, not to say that something that started, say, in TNG or whatever is not canon. But if it's going to be about Vulcans, say, yeah. So in the original series, Spock is briefly, explaining the history of Vulcan, the planet, and he goes and he says that due to high emotional tensions, they had these massive wars and everything. And, Surak comes through at the end of all of this and convinces them that the better way to live is to suppress the emotions. Not to get rid of them. They kind of fool themselves into thinking that, if you go through the right loopholes and rituals, Kolinar or whatever, you can purge yourself of all emotion. I don't think that's feasible. You know what? I think that they know this. I haven't watched them in a while, but there was quite a few episodes of Enterprise that sort of dealt with this, and the issue of racism, which again is this thing, I guess that this really scatterbrained video is really about. Because that's something that I think that people who are immersed in our own culture just simply can't get. They can't get themselves outside and just imagine what the perceptions of the Vulcans would be in this fictional universe. So basically, their perception of humans, okay, they were the first aliens to make contact with humans, and they helped them out a bit because they understood that they had just gotten through their war. They seemed sort of ready, but they hadn't. See, this is the thing: the Vulcans fooled themselves into thinking that the only way their civilization could survive was to be as non-emotional as possible and dedicated in a strict philosophy of pure logic. Okay, hopefully I don't have to explain why the word why the word logic is completely misused in almost every single incarnation of Star Trek, not to mention other media. I mean, logic is not what most people think it really is. I mean, it's sort of in the shows, it's sort of like a placeholder word for any form of higher reasoning. And while while logic is certainly part of that, it is not the full picture. So whatever, call it, higher reasoning or whatever it is. The Vulcans, they made the mistake of thinking that that was the only way their civilization could survive. And, well, it did. It worked out for them. And so they, seeing and again, Enterprise sort of goes into this a little bit more in depth, but, them seeing the Klingons, the Andorians, Tellarites, and other aliens, from the Vulcan point of view, they were all doomed. They got into space by sheer dumb luck. And so they were very fearful of humans for many of the same reasons, namely them being susceptible to their emotions. So, in this one criticism of Star Trek 2009, where they show the clips of these Vulcan boys and the guy at the Science Academy saying, basically talking shit about humans. He's like, oh, so racism is logical? Well, yeah, sorry to say, but sometimes it can be. This is not, my God, the fact that I have to say this, but this is not an endorsement of racism. It's not saying that it's okay or emotionally valid. I'm just saying that, yes, from certain people's point of view, logic, if you actually understand what the fuck logic is, racism or xenophobia or whatever can be logical. The Vulcans looked at humans as a lesser species for specific reasons. It wasn't just a knee-jerk fear. But yeah, I mean, you look at the narrative of how Vulcan technology progressed, now human technology progressed. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for the Vulcans, Starfleet, I mean, the Federation in general, most likely would not be where it is. The ship designs, the Prime Directive, which of course gets completely thrown under the bus all the time, but they really laid the bedrock. It's like humans were secondary. Humans sort of had the greater exploratory impulse, but they were really sort of riding on the coattails of Vulcans in terms of, the actual fuel, if you will. So yeah, I think that if you just sort of try and remove yourself from it, then yes, the Vulcans, they had plenty of good reasons to look down on the humans. So when Sarek marries Amanda, of course, he does it because, like all other Vulcans, he really does have emotions. He just suppresses them. So he builds this bullshit rationalization that, well, it seemed logical at the time. And so he marries her, and then Spock is there, and because they live on Vulcan, Spock naturally assumes a Vulcan cultural way of life. And the kids, they're not immune to the propaganda. They've been raised on Vulcan. They understand. I mean, it's like, this is just sort of one of those points where I'm like, honestly, do you even fucking Trek? Do you know what you're talking about? I mean, if you've, I mean, really? Sorry.